Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics, history, and action figures, and home of the Mystery Box. And today, we are taking a look at some Thunderbolts. I just went to the premiere of the new Thunderbolts movie last night, and let me tell you, I have got a lot to say. There are incredible parallels about where Thunderbolts is as a comic, where it was at the time in the Marvel Universe, with where the Thunderbolts movie is, and there's a lot to get into. So if you're not familiar with Thunderbolts, it was a 1965 British TV series where a family of adventurers flew around in high-tech ships and were portrayed by these god-awful puppet marionette things that... Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm being told that's actually Thunderbirds. Thunderbolts was a comic that came out in the late 90s. And to really kind of get an idea of what was going on with Thunderbolts, you need to have an idea of what was happening with Marvel Comics around that time. The comic industry had basically gone bust. The speculator boom had ended, where people were buying multiple copies of comics thinking that they were going to finance their future, that comics were like stocks and were always going to continue to go up. Marvel had had an exodus of talent. Some of the biggest name creators, some of the biggest artists, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, had all left to form Image Comics. And the company was basically bankrupt, both creatively, there's a word there somewhere, both creatively and financially. And so, it was a really, really bad time for Marvel Comics. But luckily, it's sometimes during some of the worst times that some of the best ideas come out. So enter writer Kurt Busiek and artist Mark Bagley. Now, most of you know Mark Bagley for his extensively long runs on Amazing Spider-Man and also Ultimate Spider-Man. But he was actually the artist on Thunderbolts when the title started. And Marvel was so bankrupt that they begged Liefeld and Jim Lee to come back into the fold. So they had like this huge crossover event called Onslaught. And at the end of it, the Fantastic Four and the Avengers sacrificed their lives to save the Earth, and they were gone. So they were no longer in the Prime Marvel Universe. And the reason for this was Marvel decided to give those titles to Liefeld and to Lee. So Jim Lee got like the Fantastic Four, Liefeld got like Avengers and Captain America. It led to some of the most recognizable art of all time. And those guys were sort of in a pocket universe, right? And so the main Marvel universe was left without any real heroes. Enter the Thunderbolts. So you've got a universe with no Avengers, no Fantastic Four. Who is going to stand up for the little guy? And so Thunderbolts 1 hit the stands, and it was a revelation. Here is this new group of superheroes that we really haven't seen any of them before. And they were led by Citizen V. And so we have gotten a figure of Citizen V. He's a really cool design. Like, his base design is pretty bland, but he's got this mask that, really kind of completely hides his identity. Obviously, just, fully patriotic with the stars and stripes. And he has like a sword. So it's kind of a unique guy. So he was the leader of the group. And unfortunately, we've only gotten two other figures from that original cast of Thunderbirds, and they are Mach 5 right here, which is a really cool figure. I'm not sure how much reuse of this has been, done with other figures, but I'm certain that the head and then this backpack, so that he has flight, are new. So cool, like metallic look to this figure. And then we got Songbird. No, yeah, Songbird. And the cool thing with her is she's got this great, effect. It pegs right into her back. Really cool costume. Lot of detail here. The white, the gold, and the black looks really good with her hair. So Thunderbolts comes out, and it's a smash hit. It's a creative new idea. And this is in kind of the early or pre-internet days where you could actually keep a secret. So Thunderbolts' first issue hits the stands, and you turn to that final page and realize that these new do-gooders are actually the original masters of evil in disguise, and that Citizen V is in fact Baron Zemo, and that this is all a plot to take over the United States and eventually the world. So it was an unbelievably shocking turn of events, particularly in comics of the day. To genuinely be surprised by something was remarkable. And, the seeds were there. I mean, here's the Citizen V figure, and you can see you probably should never trust anybody who wraps themselves in the flag and then talks a good game but doesn't actually follow through. And, before you give me a hard time about Captain America's costume, look at Captain America's actions, not his words. But when you just talk a good game wrapped in the flag, we all should be a little bit suspicious of that. Songbird, gorgeous. So Citizen V was Baron Zemo. Songbird was what I would consider a relatively minor villain known as Screaming Mimi, but she was able to use kind of those powers with this and really great costume upgrade. Got to give credit to Mark Bagley for the costume upgrade of this. And then Mach 5 was actually the Beetle. So the Spider-Man villain, the Beetle, became Mach 5. So these characters, were pretending to be heroes, but then as time went on, they sort of went against Baron Zemo's plans of world domination. They actually liked being heroes, and it created an incredible conflict in the book. And those first issues with Kurt Busiek writing them, they're really great. Now, the Thunderbolts went in all kind of different directions. They've had a ton of different iterations since that time, but these are the originals, and I'd really love to see the rest of the original team with Atlas and everybody else put together in figure form. That would be really great. But let's actually take a look at some figures that were these, but their original incarnations, beginning with Baron Zemo himself. So here is the Zemo figure that was the Walgreens exclusive figure. This thing is absolutely fantastic. It is a great classic Zemo figure. Zemo, this version of Zemo, we're going to talk about the legacy of the Baron Zemo title. But this version of Zemo first appeared in Captain America 275, I believe, and he's kind of the current modern Baron Zemo. This is Helmet Zemo, who was the founder of the Thunderbolts and kind of the guy who wanted to do all that. Love that mask and this belt. He comes with his sword, which was kind of a giveaway when you see the Citizen V figure. Very, very choice. There's another one. We have in the modern Marvel Legends line gotten kind of a more, modern, I don't know if this was like Marvel Now, but this was a newer, more contemporary version of Helmet Zemo. It's basically utilizing the same head, but it's got all of this kind of hokey tech gear and stuff. For me, I for sure prefer the original version. It's not really Silver Age, I mean, it's a little bit later than that, but definitely this is the one that I have in my villains display because it looks really good. But as I mentioned, Helmet Zemo was not the first Baron Zemo, and he wasn't even the first one in the Marvel Universe. That title went to his father, Heinrich Zemo, who actually put together the very first Masters of Evil in some of the early Avengers books. Now, a little bit of a different style. He's got kind of the collar all the way around. His mask is loose. It's not tucked in the way the second one is, and he's got a little bit of a different headdress here. This is a Toy Biz figure from, I believe, the Mojo Build-A-Figure wave. So this one goes all the way back to like 2004, 2005. Still stands up. It's got some of the weird Toy Biz joints, but they're actually hidden by this cuff here. Big shoulders, has the articulated fingers that we're used to seeing with Toy Biz figures. But Toy Biz was famous for giving us variants. And the backstory of Heinrich Zemo, even before the modern 616 Marvel Universe, was that he was one of Captain America's Nazi villains when Cap and Bucky were fighting in World War II. And during so this Zemo is the one who was responsible for Bucky's death. They were taking on Zemo when Bucky tried to like grab hold of a jet that was going to go and like bomb the US, and he fell into the ocean, and both he and, well, Cap fell into the ocean, Bucky stayed on, and the jet like exploded, and Bucky was then dead for like 40 years. until Matt Fraction and Steve Epting and the crew with Captain America brought him back as the Winter Soldier. And we will see Winter Soldier a little bit later on in here. But that's how important Heinrich Zemo is to Marvel history. But back when he was fighting Captain America during World War II, he was trying to use a substance called Adhesive X, and Cap, I don't know if he threw a shield or something, but the adhesive exploded all over his mask, permanently scarring his face. And so Toy Biz gave us this variant version of Heinrich with his scarred, destroyed face. And I mean, that thing is horrific and terrible all at the same time. And so this was like a running variant that you could pick up in the stores. I'm sure I never saw this in a store. I never saw any of their variants in a store. I figure I picked this up off of eBay at some point down the line, but just look at the sculpting and the paintwork of that. Now, Hasbro recently, like within the last couple of years, re-released this version of Zemo in a 2-pack with Armin Zola, and he came with a separate head that you could put on that was more of the scarred head, but it doesn't really hold a candle or candle wax, however you want to look at it, to this head that Toy Biz sculpted. So good. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of other villain figures from the original Thunderbolts, their villain counterparts, but one that we do have is Mach 5's villainous form of the Beetle. So this Beetle was in probably one of the Spider-Man sub-series lines. Really cool. It's got the Beetle wings that, can kind of clamp down. You can take the wings off and put that backpack there, but I think they look really good with it open and spread out. Really love the metallic sheen on this. And I think he's probably just a hodgepodge of different parts, but that unique head looks really good. Now, the Beetle was a very, very early Spidey villain. He was one of the Ditko villains from the first 36 issues, but unfortunately, this is kind of his Silver Age look, not his original Ditko look. I would love to get a figure of the original Ditko Beetle. Now, I honestly don't know if it's the same person that was in this version of the Beetle armor. I don't know that I own a single comic with this in it, but this figure was just so freaking awesome. I had to bring it out and share it. You've got a wind-up feature here that I hope still works. Well, oh, it's this way. Okay, so you can see there's little pegs in the back of his wings, and if you wind it up and get out of the way, sometimes... Oh, wait, there's a button. Okay, let's see if it works. You guys ready? Okay, that wasn't a lot. Okay, it's trying to. So those wings will actually flap. This was definitely in the Spider-Man Classics line, the subset of 6-inch figures that was dedicated to Spider-Man, and they were very much geared toward kids. But what Toy Biz did, and this figure was from 2005, I believe, what they did was they gave kids figures that they could play with like these crazy flapping wings, but collectors these unique sculpts of gorgeous toys that we would not have gotten anywhere else. I mean, look, he's got articulated fingers all the way around, and they've got those super cool like blast points on the tips of his fingers. I mean, how cool is that? He has unique individual articulated toes. Can you imagine this? I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're paying, $50 for a Maximum figure. And this was in the kids line. This was in the just stick them on shelves on Walmart line for this amazing Beetle figure. So again, I don't know if it has anything to do with Thunderbolts, but it was such a cool one that I really wanted to get it out and display it. So Thunderbolts the comic came at a time when Marvel Comics were kind of at a low point, and I think that parallels nicely with the Thunderbolts movie because we've started to see a little bit of a resurgence. Obviously, Deadpool Wolverine was fantastic. Captain America Brave New World was a miss, let's just be honest. But we need somebody to lead the MCU going forward with Steve Rogers, with Chris Evans gone. Somebody's got to be the heart and soul of the MCU, and I would argue it's Yelena Belova. Florence Pugh's portrayal of this character, now across the Black Widow movie, the Hawkeye Disney Plus series, and Thunderbolts, has stood out as some of the finest work in the entire MCU, like in the history of it. Now, This is her Black Widow figure. Not that you can tell, because it looks absolutely nothing like her. I mean, I I I know what Florence Pugh looks like. I'm a big fan of Florence Pugh. I do not see very much Florence Pugh here. A little bit better, a little bit better, a little closer with this Hawkeye figure. I think that she has one of those faces that, because it's fairly soft, her features are fairly soft, it's hard to sculpt in action figure form. But when you see the new 2-pack that's coming out for Thunderbolts, that one looks really good. So hopefully that figure is going to come out exactly like the renders that we've seen. I'm actually really looking forward to it. But Yelena, she is definitely the center. She is the star of this movie, and she's brilliant. I mean, her acting, her emotion, her story, her weaving of the emotional ties to her story is so good, and it's the thing that, kind of grounds Thunderbolts, but also makes you care about it. I was talking to somebody this morning. They asked me what I thought of the movie, and I was like, it told a really tight, complete story. And Florence Pugh is a star. I told them, I'm like, she is the heart and soul of the MCU. And it's partly because she's a really good actress. I said, Marvel movies hire great actors and actresses. If you have like a superhero movie and it doesn't have good acting in it's a DC movie. But let's hope that James Gunn, switches that up with Superman. Now, alongside her, you had David Harbour's portrayal of the Red Guardian. Now, this was the first Red Guardian figure that came out in the Black Widow series, and it's kind of terrible. I mean, that face looks so flat and lifeless. Thankfully, thank goodness, they gave us a second version. Look at what a difference painting and that digital print job does. Plus, this is the exact same costume, exact same sculpt, but with better paint. It looks so much more lifelike. And the relationship between these two was a huge driver in the film. Yeah, Red Guardian, he provides some comic relief in the movie, but he's also, again, he's a heart and soul guy. His motivations are there, and he kind of drives the entire team forward. So really, really awesome. There's also some sweet scenes where David Harbour, who's basically the adoptive father of Yelena Belova, where he calls her Lena. He doesn't call her Yelena. It's obviously like a pet name, like a little shortened name that he has for her. It's really sweet. And it's just those kind of personal touches that these two actors brought to this film that made a phenomenal difference in the quality and how much you cared about this movie. Now, you had other members of the Thunderbolts, and like I said, we're actually getting 2 new 2-packs. We'll get like one that has, and I can't remember who's with who, but you get a new Yelena along with a new Red Guardian, and you're also going to get a new John Walker with somebody. I've actually ordered them. Doesn't really matter. Bucky is in the film. This is the Bucky from Cap and Winter Soldier, I think. From that miniseries. It's pretty good. It's got his sort of most modern look to his cybernetic arm. Bucky's really good. You see him evolve throughout the film. John Walker is kind of a surprise part of the movie for me. So I remember John Walker in the comics when he took over as Captain America, and they did like a really good job of that in the Cap Winter Soldier Disney Plus series. They made him into a total jerk. I mean, he is a complete douche nozzle, and that comes through again in this movie. I mean, he is starts out as a very unsympathetic character, but as you go through the film, you learn a little bit more about him, and you actually see kind of where he's coming from stuff. So again, this is a movie that is all about character development and character change and backstory. It's really very similar to Guardians in that way, in that, it's the characters that are driving the story. And I like that. And I think a lot of people are going to like it as well. This is John Walker in his Captain America version. It's basically just a repaint, but it's more of the classic red and blue. Another kind of, here is Bucky as the Winter Soldier. I just kind of pulled this one out because it's such a cool figure. I just kind of love long-haired Winter Soldier Bucky. And it ties into Baron Zemo, right? Because Baron Zemo, had he not done what he did during World War II, would not have led to the creation of the Winter Soldier in the comics. And just because I had him, this is the Daniel Bruhl Baron Zemo from the different MCU aspects, but pretty good figure. He's a guy who I think it's probably hard to get his head sculpt right, but they kind of nailed it. It looks actually really, really good. The final member, active early member of the Thunderbolts that I want to talk about is Ghost. And Ghost is from like the second Ant-Man movie, right? So she has such a unique power set, being able to phase. And in the film, they do a great job of utilizing her in fight scenes where her power set is so different and how she can use it to her advantage. There's a female character, and she's obviously a great fighter, but she doesn't have anywhere near the strength of, a super soldier. But she can hold her own by uniquely using her powers. Now, this is the first one that we got, and I wish that she had been one of the figures that was in one of the upcoming 2-packs in the suit that she wore in the movie, because it is different from this one, and I would love to have an upgraded version of this figure. But now we got to talk about the guy that really sort of changes the game in the movie. And that's the fourth one. That's the fourth figure in those 2-packs. It's the Sentry. How can I forget that? And it looks really good. I'm an idiot, but I'm getting there. So the story of the Sentry in comics is really fascinating. So you're getting through the crappy times of Marvel. After the bankruptcy, you've brought in Joe Quesada. He has now taken over. He started with the Marvel Knights line, and they've given him like a little corner of the Marvel universe to come up with some really cool ideas. And one of them that came from that was the idea for Sentry. Now, Sentry, again, this is back before the internet was really everywhere, and you could get away with some stuff. So Marvel kind of teamed up with Wizard Magazine to plant a false story that there were some like original, like pre-Marvel Universe stories that were discovered of the first Marvel superhero, this guy who had the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, and that it was like a secret discovery, and they were going to try and bring him back and integrate him into the Marvel Universe. And so writer Paul Jenkins teamed with artist Jay Lee and did a 5-issue miniseries inside Joe Quesada's Marvel Knights imprint about the Sentry. And they made it to where this was a character who had forgotten himself. Like he didn't know who he was. And in part of that, everyone else had forgotten him too. So he was like a major part of the Marvel Universe, but had been lost to time because he had forgotten who he was. So this version of Sentry, I'm pretty sure this was in the Toy Biz Giant Man Build-A-Figure wave. This is kind of the 40s, 50s version. He's got the super short hair, the incredibly bright colored costume, just really, really good. They had a second, more modern version that had an alternate head sculpt with his longer hair and beard. And of course, this is classic Toy Biz. It's got those wonky ball hips. You've got the articulated fingers, but again, still bright costume, just with an alternate head. But they also had a third variant, because that's what we need in action figures, is 3 freaking variants to collect. But this one has kind of the darker, more modern color scheme, which sort of led to, his backstory and who he was. So they quote reintroduced, they kind of created this new character, but played it off as if he were actually a long lost old character and brought him into the Marvel Universe. But he had basically multiple personality disorder, or dissociative identity disorder. And so in one identity, he did not remember the Sentry. He did not know that he had basically the powers of a god. In another personality, he was Robert Reynolds, or Bob Reynolds, the Sentry, a hero, basically Marvel Superman before that existed. He was best friends with Reed Richards. He, the Hulk, and he taught the Hulk how to be a hero. But a third identity was his evil persona as the Void. And that was portrayed quite uniquely in the Thunderbolts movie. I don't want to spoil anything. This is the Void Build-A-Figure that we got last year, I think it was. And I know that many of you have not seen the film, but if you've seen any of the preview trailers, there are these scenes where people are disappearing. They're kind of turning into shadows, basically. And it actually made me think about our trip to Japan last summer. It was an incredible trip, one of my favorite trips of my life. I did so much cool toy hunting. It just was great. But the most meaningful part of that trip was we went to Hiroshima and we toured the area where the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, and we went to the museum that houses all of the artifacts and tells the story of the atomic blast. And you may have heard that the when the atomic blast hit, that the only thing that was left of people on the ground were shadows. And when I saw the actions of the Void in those trailers for Thunderbolts, it immediately made me think about those shadows from Hiroshima. And in the museum, they actually have the steps of a bank building, and you can see those shadows on the steps, the shadow of a man on those steps. And it's not actually a shadow. What happened was that building was so close to the epicenter of the blast, and the power of the blast and the blinding light of the release of all of that atomic energy was so bright that it obviously incinerated the man that was sitting there, but it bleached all of the marble and the stone around him. So all that was left was that shadow. And that's a haunting thing about the power of humanity and what we are capable of, both good and bad. But I mean, it's a little deeper than we tend to get on carbon scoring videos, but it's important. And when you have a character who is essentially God, like the Sentry is, you need to examine what does all that power mean. And I thought that the movie did a great job of not only looking at what does it mean to have the power of God, but they also touched on the mental health aspects that led to his creation and how that formed exactly who he was. Really good stuff. You got to see the film. This is a really crappy Hasbro figure. This thing looks like it's just cobbled together from Hyperion with an extra head and a new belt. The cape doesn't even fit on right. They had to drill like a second hole for the cape to go in. So, I mean, it's a much more modern Sentry figure, but it's not very good. So thankfully, they came out with this beauty, which is the newest figure of Sentry that we've gotten. He's got the great flowing hair, the much brighter costume, a little bit of a smaller belt logo there. It just depends on what artist is drawing it. But this is a far, far superior Sentry figure to the ones that we've gotten before. And it even came with an alternate head that you could snap on to create kind of his Void persona. So the Sentry is kind of the linchpin. He's kind of the moving parts between the era of the Thunderbolts being Marvel's heroes into when Brian Michael Bendis came into the Marvel Universe and created the New Avengers. And Sentry was one of the members of the New Avengers. And so you will see how all of that pieces together. But I hope this was fun. I hope that you guys learned a ton about comics history, not just the stories of the comics, but kind of the stories behind the comics, learned about the artists and the writers that were involved in this, and also got to see some pretty cool action figures as well. And if this is the kind of thing that you enjoy, let me know. Leave me a comment, give the video a like, and as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.